acknowledge and welcome U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain, His Excellency Justin Siberel, members of the American Chamber of Commerce in Bahrain, members of the Bilateral U.S. Arab Chamber of Commerce in Houston, Texas, members of the U.S. Chamber in Washington, D.C., and members of the Bahrain Chamber of Commerce, and our guests. Over the past few months, a new lingo appeared, which was used by both young and old alike. It is the COVID-19 lingo, comprising of words such as pandemic, clusters, community spread, social distancing, quarantine, travel bans, homeschooling, etc., all of which have become part of our daily routine and life. Traditionally, strong and properly equipped, the oil industry was caught off guard by COVID-19. With no historical precedent to rapidly adapt, the pandemic posed a significant risk to the industry worldwide, shattering oil demand and sinking oil prices, impacting oil investments, and imposing major economic and social challenges around the world. With COVID-19 in mind, AmSham Bahrain is honored to have His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed, Minister of Oil, as our honored guest this evening to brief us on the challenges faced by the industry, its impact on Bahrain's oil and gas exploration, lessons learned, as well as his optimistic views on the matter going forward. By way of introduction, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Ahmed AlKhalifa graduated with honors from the King Fahd University Petroleum and Minerals with BSc degree in electronics. He completed his higher education in the United Kingdom with master's degree from the University of Cambridge and an advanced master's from the Imperial College of Science. He also holds an MBA from DePaul University. In 1999, His Excellency joined the Ministry of Finance, where he became a director of government shareholdings. During his tenure at the ministry, he worked on the privatization of key projects, including the privatization of power plants, Sea Properties IPO, and the Muharraq STP. In 2011, His Excellency was appointed as the Chief Executive of the Oil and Gas Holding Company. He is currently Chairman of the National Oil and Gas Authority, the Oil and Gas Holding Company, Tatweer Petroleum Company, and Arab Shipbuilding and Repair Yard Company. In 2016, His Excellency was appointed by royal decree as the Minister of Oil in Bahrain and has been serving in this capacity since. Prior to putting His Excellency on air, I would like to introduce AmSham's Bahrain board member and treasurer, Daniel Taylor, who will host the program. Daniel is the Chief Financial Officer at the First Bahrain Real Estate Development Company. The project portfolio includes a range of retail, residential, and industrial income-generating properties. Daniel's connection with Bahrain began in 1989 as deployed officer of the US Navy. He studied for his Bachelor's of Arts in History at the University of Virginia and earned a Master's of Business Administration with distinction from the Graduate School of Business at DePaul University, the same graduating class as His Excellency the Minister. I will now hand over to Daniel to begin the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kais, for that excellent introduction. And Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us this evening to speak with the American Chamber of Commerce community. As we begin, I'd like to thank you all, thank you and the leadership of the country for all you're doing to help us navigate through these trying times. We are grateful for the balanced approach you've taken to fight the virus while maintaining a level of openness in the economy. You have taken calculated risks and done better than most other countries in managing this crisis. I would not rather be anywhere else. We look forward to hearing your insights into how global energy markets are being impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic Then we are interested in an update on Bahrain's oil and gas exploration and development projects. And in the final third of our time together, recognizing that in all challenges, there are opportunities, we'd like to intentionally explore with you what you see on the horizon that represents hope, concluding with a few minutes for Q&A at the end. Your Excellency, we welcome you.
Well, thanks, Dan. Greetings and salutations. It's morning and evening throughout. I'd like to recognize His Excellency the Ambassador, Qais, Mary, and Dan. Thank you, AmCham, for Bahrain, for arranging this. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. Wishing you a blessed Ramadan and praying that all of you and your families are safe and in good health as we go through these exceptional times. Certainly at the beginning of the year, I had no idea that we'd be going through such turmoil, but it was a discussion I had with Jeff Curry from Goldman Sachs, and we used the term, I think it was either him or I used the term biblical events. And we did remember that there was a locust attack on crops in East Africa. Some of it crossed into the Arabian Peninsula and into Bahrain. I'm sure Dan and Qais, you probably saw some of that. So it is the biblical proportions. Let's hope it'll be over soon. Yes, I am the forever optimist. It's been a year since our last mission to the US, a little bit more than a year, but it's good to have some of the people we've met there join us today. Appreciate the time. And of course, I'll talk a little bit about our views of where the global oil industry is and shed some light on what we've been up to since our meeting there in Houston in April last year. So if you'd like me to begin, I can start with the slides, Dan, or if you have specific questions.
Well, actually, let's start with the global view. Obviously the markets are experiencing significant demand and supply shocks, and energy demand has tumbled 30% at least amidst the coronavirus-related travel and business restrictions. Price of oil has fallen in the neighborhood of 59% into the $25 to $30 per barrel range. And just yesterday, Saudi Arabia announced that they were cutting an additional 1 million barrels per day. On the supply side, there's running out of room of places to store the oil that we have. So we'd like you to address your perspective on the oil and financial markets, and what do you think it's going to take to see recovery to a stabilized price point, and how we can just at the macro level to begin with.
I've got some slides. Would you like me to bring them up, or should
absolutely.
I wait?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if there's some problems with the connections, do let me know. I think the kids are probably on Netflix. So. Okay, so if I can start with the first slide, maybe it gives you a quick idea. Who has control of the slides? Can we go to the first slide? Yeah, okay. So this slide basically gives you an idea of oil price, oil production and consumption. The blue line, if you see it clearly, is production, and the golden one is consumption. Prices fell in 2015, the end of 14 actually, and this is where the problem started in the oil industry. And you can see why. Production was higher than consumption. So there was a surplus. I think shale from the US was a major contributor to that increase in oil production. And prices, of course, crashed in 15. They I think, reached the bottom. And then in 16, OPEC Plus was formed, which was a new charter that involved Russia and a few other oil producers. Bahrain is part of the OPEC Plus. Although we're a very small producer, we do attend the meetings, and they started end of 16. You can see that production declined a little bit, brought a little bit of balance to the markets, and we saw prices increase till 2018 they hit a peak of $80. But then in 19, there was a bit of excess supply coming through. Again, US shale with the fantastic innovation of fracking was the reason production increased more than consumption. And as we entered 2020, prices were in the 65 range. Nobody had any idea of this pandemic that was just around the corner. But we started feeling it in March, and that's when the meeting took place. I attended it personally there in Vienna. And everybody was in agreement at the time. They were looking at a reduction of 1.5 million, which it's dwarfed with what volumes were taken later. So beginning of March, the Russians had the view that there was no reason for a production cut and that the markets could easily handle production. And although we did see the effects of COVID-19 at the time. So we had that discussion with the Russian minister, and I did pose the question to him, is Russia willing to consider production cuts if markets deteriorate? And I got a signal that yes. So we left that meeting with, people started looking at what the prices were going to be. Saudi Arabia and the other OPEC countries decided they were going to increase production by April, and prices, of course, crashed. But listening to the Russians, I knew that there was still room for an agreement. And this is where I think the US administration, and I have to thank Secretary Brouillet for his leadership. His Excellency the Ambassador was kind enough to arrange a telephone call with him later in March. And it was just the time where the US was trying to bring OPEC, OPEC Plus, and other oil-producing nations together. And ultimately, it came up with this agreement where I think 10 million barrels was decided as a cut. It was a little bit too little, too late for saving the second quarter of the year. And then you can see the sharp drop in demand, the inverse triangle. And that's the real problem. I think April was one of the worst periods in history, in the oil industry. We lost around 25 million barrels of demand. And for the first time ever, we saw negative pricing on WTI, which nobody really expected to see. But it was because of the congestion that was caused in this oil supply chain, especially in North America. But as predicted, it was short-lived. Things are coming back. Prices are still depressed. Our crudes here are still below 30, despite Brent recovering. A lot of the crudes here in the Middle East are in the 20 level, so much lower than where they were. But the good news is that the surplus supply of 25 million is now probably closer to 6 million, which tells you that there is a recovery in demand, although still small. And perhaps the production cut initiatives are taking effect. So unfortunately, I think we'll have to wait till the end of June to see any real improvements. So the second quarter is probably a quarter we want to remove from the history books. Like, and everybody's hoping for a V-shaped recovery, and it's primarily demand that can save us now. I think everybody's done what they can with supply reduction. I think that extra 1 million from Saudi Arabia is certainly a welcome initiative, but what is really needed right now is for demand to come back, which means a resolution to easing up of the lockdowns and a solution to this COVID-19. I mean, I'm not one for making prophecies, but in an ancient Arab astronomy and astrology, there's a belief that when the Thuraya star constellation, which is called the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters, when they appear, typically viruses wane off and they just disappear. And you'll be happy to know that as of tonight, I think the Thuraya star appears in the skies. So if there's any truth to that old knowledge, then prepare for some good news. Otherwise, please stay at home. I'm not advocating anything, just watch the news. But if there's any truth, we'll see some improvement, hopefully, in the global numbers. If not, I think hopefully a vaccine is not too far away, and we need people to come back to traveling, doing business, going out and about. I mean, we've never seen something like this, so it's uncharted territories. But I think overall, there's very strong collaboration globally. I think social media has been instrumental here, keeping people together. These webinars and, of course, the virtual meetings could change behavior for the future. So that's a long-winded discussion about where I think the markets are. We are hoping for a V-shaped recovery. Once that comes back, things should come back to normal. And if history is anything to go by, the Spanish flu pandemic, after it was over, you had the Roaring 20s. So there is a historic proof that economics will come back. So reason to be bullish.
Absolutely.
But how long that takes depends on what transpires. And
now, how is Bahrain doing? In the midst of this, obviously, we don't have as big reserves as some of our big neighbors. What's the impact to us directly?
Well, first of all, I think we'd have to commend the leadership here, as Royal Highness the Crown Prince really saw this way ahead of everybody else. And we did not expect this to happen, but for some reason he had the vision of this transpiring, and they took all the necessary measures, as you said, Dan. And they started testing early, and they started taking precautionary measures that allowed them to avoid a total lockdown on the Bahraini economy. The impact is obviously on the oil price, and we do depend on oil revenues. That has a significant impact. But we're hoping it's going to be short-lived. So far we're okay. I mean, we have good reserves to shore us up for a while. Our projects continue going ahead, but we're looking at, of course, austerity measures, which are critical. The entire region is doing it, and it's something that's affecting the globe. But for now, I think we remain optimistic, and the situation is very stable. The Ministry of Finance is well underway into their fiscal reform program. So we're just hoping this is a small dent of a quarter, not more than 3 months.
So on that point, on that point, as we look at necessary spending cuts and adjustments, how's that impacting your ability to continue to invest and work for the future, especially given the opportunities that we've been very excited to hear you announce about the Khalija Bahrain field, and obviously this is a long-term investment, and it's several years out still before it's going to have production, I understand. And so obviously we need to keep investing. How is this situation going to impact us in the short run and our ability to be able to realize ultimately the benefit from that field?
Well, I can start going through the rest of the slides if you like. It's been a busy year since last April. So if we go to the next slide, so these are the exploration opportunities, and so these are the territorial areas of Bahrain, just around 9,000 square kilometers. We have 4 offshore blocks. The green area to the west of Bahrain is the Khalij al-Bahrain Basin. That's the unconventional oil, the very large play, and we continue doing a lot of work. I'll talk about the results of the first producing well. We're looking at hooking it up to our production systems fairly soon. And we're looking at a few appraisal wells to delineate the resource, see how far it extends. We've also been working on the deep gas resource, and we've re-entered one of the old wells, and it's in production as we speak. We've also drilled 2 deep gas wells, or pre-Aneza wells as we call them. I will talk about those in later slides. And of course, we just completed a seismic acquisition of the entire offshore area of Bahrain, and we already have drillable prospects, and we plan to hold a virtual roadshow and invite IOCs to have a look. And we welcome companies, IOCs that we already have NDAs with, to approach our virtual data room, and they're welcome to look at the data. It's certainly exciting. That's a new prospect for us, where we can target conventional oil and gas resources beyond the unconventional oil and gas. That's another excitement we're going to work on hopefully soon, and invite IOCs to join us in a virtual roadshow. If I can, unless you have any questions, I can move to the next slide.
No, I mean, and that's very good news about more conventional opportunities as well.
Yes. So for Khalij al-Bahrain, we promised last year that we were going to drill and produce our first appraisal well. I have to thank Halliburton for doing an excellent job here. They really put all the effort and knowledge that they've gained from the Jafurah Basin in Saudi Arabia, and I can truly say that the completion of the well, the drilling and the completion, the fracking of the well, was done exceptionally well, and I think it was very good. We started flowing the well late last year. We were surprised to see that the oil was a little bit heavier than we've seen previously, but the formations was almost identical. Maturities were almost the same. They were a bit less than our initial discovery well, which was to the south of the basin, the first cab well. This was, I think, had a maturity of 1, for those of you who understand technicalities. But we then installed an ESP because it was liquid rich. It had more oil than gas. And there was very little formation water, almost none. But a peculiar thing is that we still are producing the injected water. So typically you don't produce the majority of the water you inject. So far, we've almost produced 60% of the water we've produced. And what we've seen recently is that the oil saturation has actually moved from 5%, 10%, and now it's up to 65% oil. It's improving. We have been experiencing some challenges with gas locking, because although it doesn't have as much gas as the previous well, again, for those of you who are aware of the technical terms, the gas oil ratio here was around 500 SCF versus 2000 in the previous well. So it's less gassy, more oil rich. And the API came back up to around 35.5. Now, from a refining perspective, that's probably the best kind of oil you could get for a refinery. What we're hoping to solve for now is the production challenge. And Halliburton's been working with us on fixing this gas locking phenomena. The pump keeps getting gas locks several times a day, but we've kept it at the low chalk, and still we get flows of 600 barrels. And of course, then gas locks comes back down, but the ESP, which is around 100 horsepower, was capable of producing at least 1,000 barrels a day of fluid. So we're hopeful once we can unlock this or solve for this gas locking problem, we can see a steady flow. And we're getting closer to a much higher oil saturation. Good news is that there's virtually no formation water. So whether producing a majority of the water fracked is a good thing or not, we will find out soon. But it looks encouraging. Now I think we've placed an order for what's called a gas separation unit downhole. Formation pressure seems to be holding well. A lot to be optimistic about. Of course, we've been working with both Chevron and Total on many of the details. And again, companies that have NDAs are welcome to some of the test data. So going forward, we're looking at drilling a few appraisal wells just to read better the formation. We also through the last seismic campaign, we were able to find a seismic signature that would identify the sweet spot. The Khalij al-Bahrain has the main formation, but on top of it is a resource play that acts as a higher sweet spot. And with the new seismic data acquisition, there was an attribute that could easily identify where that section is oil bearing. That's going to help us in our future appraisal. Hopefully more good news to come, and we will share information as it comes through. That's for CAB. Unless you have any questions, Dan, we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I mean, how does this relate to the coming roadshow in terms of inviting companies to invest and start to produce from that?
Well, that's ongoing. I think we are in discussions. We have a virtual data room that's set up, and we're updating it. But the roadshow I was alluding to was for something else. It was for conventional opportunities as well. And these are the blocks that are shown here.
Okay.
We just completed the processing of a seismic campaign. These are high quality 2D seismic. Previously, we have patches of 3D seismic. We've got aeromagnetic scans of the territorial area, plus these new 2D seismics. And we already identified prospects in every block with sizable potential. So I think they should be interesting for a lot of our IOC contacts. And I would invite them to talk to our technical people and visit the virtual data room. ENI was due to drill in April, but because of the COVID-19, they had to postpone it. We're waiting for, especially Italy being hit hard early. We're waiting for easing of travel restrictions from Italy. So hopefully, in the coming few weeks, we'll have clarity on when they start. But they've got all the equipment ready. Everything is set to go to drill their first exploration well in Block 1.
Excellent. So that's traditional offshore approach, right?
Conventional structures, yes. So typically what you do, you show the seismic data, and companies interested would go into a bidding process or direct negotiations, and then we'd issue a concession. And as you know, in Bahrain rules and regulations, we have a very attractive concession structure that's transparent and based on what's called a production sharing arrangement. I think the terms are probably the best in the region so far. Certainly an opportunity to look at.
Yeah. Now, in that respect, what's going to set us apart? As Chevron, is announcing that they're cutting 20%, Exxon 30%. For them to be able to continue investing, we have to compete against all other opportunities. What's going to set this opportunity apart, and why should they come here?
Well, this is it doesn't take a lot of costs to come in and go through data. I wouldn't think that that's a cost consideration, first of all. So by the time they're ready to make commitments, markets should be in better shape. Now, if you ask me of my views, I think COVID-19 would have done to the oil price what OPEC could not do for many years, i.e. the biggest victim here is going to be supply, especially if demand comes back very quickly. Because of the lack of investment, the very high decline rates, and maybe some production that will never come back, production is not going to come back at the same level we started at the beginning of the year, and hence an opportunity for prices to go even higher and for investments to increase even more. I think a quick answer is that by the time we're ready for an investment, markets should be in much better shape than they are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As even the longer this stretches out, it's difficult to restart those shale wells. And so, you know, in Texas, there's a lot that may not come back on, and that's what we, and certainly, you know, having these conventional opportunities in front of us do position us well to go forward.
Well, actually, I'm actually quite bullish about the shale patch. The good thing is it's going to impose some self-discipline. So, yeah, you're right. Unwanted production will go away, but for the strong players, I'm very bullish. I say that with a disclaimer. So, don't throw your money at things I say, but that's my opinion. You know, I think the shale patch is going to be strong, and it'll be actually a beneficiary of what comes out of this.
Yeah. Now, does it concern you that? I mean, I was reading that in West Texas, it's about $47 a barrel for the break-even price for shale. Obviously, that's one of the things that's pushing some of the shale producers out. What price point do you think it's going to have to be to make it economic to get that oil out of the ground for us?
Well, that's a difficult number to go by, because some people already have drilled wells. So, and sometimes when you say 45, it could be just operating costs. So it doesn't take into consideration the costs of drilling, etc.
Yeah.
So I would think that you know, stable price, because remember, you need stability in markets. You need to have enough supply coming in the future, because oil has this thing called the decline rate. Oil would naturally decline, so you need to continuously invest. And if you ask me, I think the right number is in the $60 area. You need something above that to make sure you have enough investment to maintain supplies globally. But certainly for companies and cash flows, they can do well at lower than that. But to get enough investment going through to meet the expected demand as we recover from this, you probably need a higher price.
Yeah. Please tell us a little bit more about what's going on with the refinery modernization project and the LNG terminal and the pre-cooked gas.
We can move to the next slide, if I may. Okay, so this is the deep gas. As you can see, the last two zones in blue we term the pre-Aneza. We produced the lower of them, Juf, which is more conventional. It's unconsolidated sand. And we've drilled 2 wells into Juf, and we're waiting for them to be fracked. The first well was vertical, suboptimal. We just did a single frack, and it started flowing at 30 million, and it's producing as we speak. We've connected it to the system here in Bahrain. It's very encouraging. The layer above, Juba, which is a little bit tighter, that's an interesting zone because we haven't seen the limits of that. Every time we try and find the delineation well, it seems to grow bigger. So this could be a very large resource for us. Both of them, you're talking something in the range of 20 to 30 TCF. On top of that, just below the red zone, we've also went into an interval we call the K3. That's around 900 feet thickness, a little bit shallow, less thick than Juba, but we fracked a few wells, again, vertical frack, suboptimal, and it again produced 30 million. We've connected some of those wells, and we're doing an appraisal currently. It seems the gas story is very exciting for Bahrain. I think we're looking to see much bigger numbers in terms of commercial reserves. We're working with a few consultants to come up with the right number. And as soon as we finish that in the next few weeks, we should have a clearer idea of how large the size of the prize is. So that's the story of the pre-Aneza gas
Excellent.
prospect.
That's good news.
Okay, we can move to the next slide, if I may. These are a few pictures of what's going on in Babco. I mean, thankfully, we've maintained work at site. The Babco modernization plan is one of our most ambitious projects. It's more than a $6 billion project overall, and it increases our capacity to around 400,000 barrels of refining capacity. state-of-the-art equipment. I'm happy to report that the project is 50% complete. There were some delays, obviously, with COVID-19, but work at site has not stopped. Babco has been doing an excellent job in testing their employees and the contractor labor. We were lucky as well that a lot of the equipment has been delivered, and some of it is on transit on the high seas to be delivered to Bahrain. We're looking at hopefully a completion of this project towards the middle of 2022. It has a significant impact, of course, on the revenue generation in the oil sector. So it's a project we very much look forward to. I don't know if I added some extra slides after this. Is there another slide? No, okay, that's the last one. But that's the project. And of course, you did mention the LNG terminal that's been commissioned and it's ready. We had our first test cargo. And now Bahrain is capable of importing LNG. The good news is we might not need to import LNG with the gas reserves we are unlocking. But it remains a good security of supply option. We are talking to the GCC, especially Saudi Arabia, to have a gas network pipeline connecting Bahrain and Saudi Kuwait, the rest of the GCC. But also potentially, we are looking at utilizing that for Bahrain to be an LNG gas storage facility. If you can add liquefaction to your regasification, you can import LNG when prices are low, store it, export it when prices are high. I think it's a facility that only the Singaporeans are looking to add. It's not something that you can easily do. LNG, once it's liquefied, it's difficult to keep it in storage as LNG for too long because it consumes a lot of energy to keep it in liquid forms. The best way is to reconvert it into gas and store it. So that's an extra opportunity. We're looking to take advantage of the LNG terminal. So that, in a nutshell, is where we are. Still very excited, and we remain optimistic. As I said, once you see that V-shaped recovery of demand coming through, I think we should all be bullish about the oil industry.
And the financing's all in place for what you need to complete the modernization project at Babco?
Yeah, that was completed last year, thankfully. And I think in this environment, you probably would have a more difficult time, but that was set a year ago and well underway. As I said, 50% complete. So a significant amount of money has been spent already, and the financing has been in place for well over a year now.
Yeah. So things are moving, and that's not going to be impacted at all by the current situation.
Well, depending on how long this takes, as I said, if you take my optimistic view, yeah, it should be over by the third quarter, or maybe even the fourth. But yeah, we should be okay till then. Governments will have to look at austerity measures. They will have to look at preserving reserves in terms of dollar reserves. But I think the world is collaborating quite well. I mean, markets seem to be liquid. And if anything, I think it's probably an opportunity now. Share prices of oil companies are at the lowest point they've been for many years. Again, with a disclaimer, I take no responsibility for money invested. I was just saying.
Well, absolutely. And so with the upgrade and the modernization project, when do we expect that to be fully online and generating revenue for the national economy?
Well, by 2022, that's when we start seeing a ramp up, and initially there'll be an automatic cash flow back to the government's coffers of around almost $2 billion first year, and then it stabilizes at around $1 billion. So it is a significant project for Bahrain. For now, of course, my main focus is on the upstream. I didn't mention, but we're also working on increasing production at the Bahrain field. We successfully started a pilot project, a risk reward with service companies, and Schlumberger has been doing an excellent job in developing this a zone we call the Ostracod Magua. We already drilled a number of wells, and production is encouraging. I think hopefully soon we're due to go into a full field development. But that is going to help us ramp up our production on the onshore side.
As I mentioned, I would like to intentionally look for signs of hope in the midst of these challenges. There will be opportunities. So, and given Bahrain's size, we are agile and we have the ability to pivot easier than many countries. Where do you see signs of opportunity and hope going forward in this? What are the things that, as the economy restructures, that you see may represent a unique opportunity?
Well, I think if you believe like me that oil prices are going to increase, and as I said, eventually I think we'll look back and see that COVID-19 did to oil prices what OPEC was trying to do for the past 4 years, i.e., it will be the reason oil prices go back up. It's difficult to predict that now, but that's certainly where my mind is set. And if that happens, and if you're ready to produce oil resources, especially, then that's one of the opportunities you have to be ready for. And hence, we want to position ourselves to be able to do that as soon as that inflection point happens. And I think the sign to look for is demand. We've already seen demand in China come back. In Europe, it's coming back. I think the theory that we're going to reach tank tops, and I was worried that that was going to happen, seems not going to materialize, because I think you've seen drawdowns in US inventories. I was looking at today's reports. So the good news is demand is coming back, and still the lockdown is not easing up too much. So it's a good sign. People are going to come back, and if history is anything to go by, consumption comes back roaring. People are just fed up with this lockdown, I'm sure. They want to travel, they want to go out, they want to go to restaurants. For that, consumption spree is going to come back once people find that it's safe and that this virus is waned off.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, prayers, and if there's anything to believe about the astrologers, astronomers, with this, the Thuraya constellation, the Seven Sisters, nothing to do with oil. It's the Pleiades constellation. Look it up. We call it the Thuraya.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I'm hopeful too. What do you see? Is there any opportunities for technology in the? I know one of the questions was posed by our friends at Amazon Web Services, and they were asking what the post-COVID-19 vision is for new technology adoption, and how you would want the technology providers to provide support.
Well, I think first of all, it's changed the way people meet. I don't know if that will be a permanent behavioral change.
Yeah.
People might say that there is no need to travel distances in planes to go to a meeting. You can do it virtually. Is that going to happen? Maybe. I think it's certainly we're getting used to meeting, and I have all of my meetings every day using Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Blue Jeans. So all of these certainly have changed the way we meet. People continue working with artificial intelligence, predictive maintenance, to help optimize operations. But that started before COVID-19. I don't know if COVID-19 is going to accelerate it. I think the way we deal with people, social distancing, people will want to be prepared for something like this happening again. And if technology can help in any way, they will certainly try and use it. But I think it took everybody back to the drawing boards in terms of, how do you conduct your operations? And a lot of the oil companies that had operations in Africa, they had to deal with viruses like Ebola. They had the experience, so they fared well. I mean, Eni is one of them. I know them quite well, but Italy was hard hit. But Eni as a company did extremely well. They had very few cases within the company. And that's, I think, due to their experience in Africa and already having the systems and the technologies to deal with viruses like COVID-19.
well-run companies are going to be able to thrive even in the midst of challenges. And what's your opinion on renewables? How is the current situation going to impact the adoption of renewables, or the need for the adoption of renewables if we have, more, where, depending on where the price point, falls out, will it be economic?
Well, certainly the lower hydrocarbon prices is not good for renewables, because people obviously, economics always prevails. I mean, we've seen people were focused on the IMO ruling on fuel oil, and they were trying to eliminate high sulfur fuel oil. So everybody was installing scrubbers in their vessels, etc. But with COVID-19, I think a lot of people have now accepted that we can postpone that. That's changing priorities. But in terms of renewables, we're doing our bit. We've installed a few solar panels in some of our oil companies. We're talking to the Electricity and Water Authority on multiple fronts. We have an initiative where we're installing this ESCO program, where you come into a building and you change appliances, lightings, etc., to achieve a more efficient consumption of electricity. So we have 4 or 5 pilot buildings going on right now with EUA. We've installed solar panels on social houses, and we've been observing the results. I think we've achieved 20-30% reduction in consumption. All of this data helps with managing your future growth potential of energy consumption. Trying to optimize all of that on the demand side is also something we've invested heavily in. Renewables have a big role to play in that angle.
Excellent. I mean, specifically in terms of EWA's positioning, I would think that they still, from a general demand for electricity, it's still going to be a strong interest for them for broader adoption of renewables here across the economy. Is that correct?
Yes, as I said, we've been working with them on multiple initiatives just to help optimize not only the supply side, but the demand side as well. I mean, they are going to start their first solar plant for EWA, for the Electricity and Water Authority. So that's going to be 100 megawatts of solar. And again, this use of the ESCO program, where you go to buildings and make them more efficient. Well, the good thing within Bahrain is, as you know, the electricity tariffs are no longer as cheap as they were. I think ultimately that's the incentive to adapt, either renewables or high efficiency appliances, the ESCO program, etc.
Sure. Your Excellency, you've been always a friend of the United States and have encouraged more use of the Bahrain-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. Let me ask you your ideas about trade for non-oil sector opportunities: supply chain, transportation, e-commerce, digitization for health, finance, banking. Where do you see opportunities to expand the relationship of trade between the U.S. and Bahrain?
Well, of course, for us, the obvious one is the oil industry. And of course, we're already well underway in our engagement with the U.S. On the upstream side, but also on the downstream side. The majority of the technologies we use in process configurations with the refinery are U.S. Technologies. I think for the rest, of course, I mean, if we can look at air cargo, that's going to be a considerable amount of trade. And as I said, we don't import as much as we should from the US in terms of consumables, maybe because of logistics. But if we can optimize that chain, mainly through air cargo, I think that could be a channel. Because trade routes are essential. Once you have those, trade normally flows into the region. I think the other part, the Federal Reserve has been opening up currency swap windows with central banks globally. That makes dollar access much easier. Again, that's probably the most important commodity for the world, the US dollar. Some people do consider it a commodity sometimes. But that's a natural trade advantage the US will always have, which is the US dollar. For the more accessible it is, the easier the flow of business. Having that, I think, and then US industries can certainly take advantage of it. And you can do it through not only the Fed, but US Exim, the other programs that promote exports. I mean, if anything, access to dollars is what US enterprises should have an advantage in. And there's growing markets around us everywhere, and this is the region to be in. And if you draw a circle around Bahrain and you include India, Pakistan, the GCC, there's huge consumption around us. So just building an optimized logistics chain is what's needed. Once you do that, I think you'll get much stronger flow of trade and many opportunities for US businesses. And it would be cross-flow. US being the largest economy as well would really be beneficial to any trade coming from this side of the world back into the US. What the main artery is having optimized logistics. Optimized being cost effective is what I mean. And with jet fuel to where it is, I mean, unfortunately, jet fuel now has become a heavily discounted product. It's cheaper than crude. It's sad to say that they're even using it as cooking fuel now. 95% of global airline fleets are grounded there.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Now, jet fuel is being used for cooking now. It's unbelievable.
Wow. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm thinking about doubling back to the issue of the new exploration and just what are you have a number of companies and representatives from the U.S. that are on the call. What are the key takeaways that you would have for them and how they can get involved? What are the next steps?
We've been in contact with Chevron. We have a technical service agreement with them, and they've been helping us with Khalij al-Bahrain. We've had various discussions with EOG. I think the resource seems to be exciting. I think it has its special traits. It doesn't have any clay content or zero clay content. And we just need to put it on stable production. As I said, with the ESP, we've seen a very strong flow, but until we can solve for this gas locking situation. But they're welcome to look at the data there. I think the resource rock is world class. If they're also interested in conventional, the entire area of Bahrain is in the most prolific oil and gas generating system in the world. So if the seismic data we have today is any good in terms of indicating a trap, that trap, especially if it's close to where we know the oil generation is almost guaranteed to have oil and almost guaranteed to have gas. So I'd urge people interested to have a look. It doesn't cost you much. Have a look at the seismic. Talk to us, and if you come early, there's certainly advantage in opening up discussions early. If not, you're welcome to join us in our upcoming roadshow. And obviously, we have direct contacts with all the major U.S. oil companies. When it comes to unconventional, they'll probably be the preferred partners to have, because it's very much a North American phenomenon. So what we're trying to prove up is that this resource has some exceptional qualities. And hopefully this will. I mean, we're still very excited about it, despite taking a bit longer than we expected. But it is exciting for it. I mean, initially we were a bit worried that the oil was a bit heavier than would be optimal. But with the ESP, it seems that maybe it's even better than typical gassier wells like the ones we've seen initially. So Khalij al-Bahrain is exciting. The gas story is as well very good. We did go far with Hunt on this, but I think eventually they decided to look at other opportunities. And again, the information we have now is certainly encouraging. We have producing wells that are connected to our gas grid, and we're drilling more of them. Seems to be quite a substantial resource, and the cost of production is extremely competitive. So for both oil and gas, we do encourage companies that already have NDAs with us to take advantage of that opportunity, and they take an earlier view of what's available. And we're very transparent. I mean, there's nothing that we will not share with them.
And all that information, get access to it on the ministry's website?
No, through our exploration team, which we already established contacts with the IOCs. But anybody who wants further direction, happy to point them out. So we can give them access to the virtual data room. But
Absolutely.
it's not on the website. No.
Okay. Well, we just want to make sure that everybody who is interested has the opportunity to come and connect. But Your Excellency, thank you very, very much. It's been a tremendous honor to have you with us here for this hour. It's been an excellent opportunity to get your views and to hear from the top what your priorities are and what the opportunities are, and I am hopeful. As you, I mean, I've always known you to be incredibly astute and to be very, and I'm grateful that you are in this position of leadership, because you are taking, continuing to take a very level head in the midst of these challenging times, and helping us see the way forward. And I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. I'd like to pass it.
And I'm certainly proud of what we've achieved. We have an amazing team of young Bahrainis and professionals working in the oil industry, and I'm just honored to be working with them. And again, thank you very much for arranging this place, Dan and Mary, and let's hope that we can create value for the people joining us today. And until then, please stay safe. Watch out for that constellation. If it is if there's truth in it, we should see this waning off very soon.
Hopefully. Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you for your participation and for your valuable time and input. We are very grateful for your continued support of AmSham and look forward to having you with us on other occasions. I would also like to thank our audience and members of the Bilateral U.S. Arab Chamber of Commerce in Houston and members of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for their support. God bless you and bless Bahrain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank His Excellency the Ambassador as well. I forgot to recognize him for all his support. Hopefully we meet face to face soon.
Absolutely.
Have a
Take
good
care.
evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.